thank you everybody for being here. And I know some people speak Spanish and some people don't, so like I said, we'll be switching. Bienvenidos. Today we launch our first artist residency for the Cachahuillaicuna project. And Cachahuillaicuna in Quechua means mensajes con belleza, messages with beauty. So we felt that it really captured the nature of art, not just in terms of like an appreciation for art as art itself, which is very important, but also as art as alternative narrative, as alternative historiography, you know, as ways to communicate, you know, with the public in different ways. And in many ways much more connected to indigenous expression. As you know, many of the cultures in Latin America were oral cultures. Now we've transformed things into written form, you know, very problematic too, and potentially restricted, you know. And maybe I'll say this, I say this sometimes during presentations, but there are several authors that say that the first moment of colonial violence was basically a question, right? And the question was, can they write? Yeah, but can they write? And that created this division immediately between us and them in terms of this dividing factor. They did not ask the more open-ended question, how do these cultures express themselves? You know, how do they capture and document their histories? They ask, can they write? You know. So I think that from our perspective, which is inquiry-led, the question is everything. Like what questions we ask will unfold into better answers or potentially worse, you know, approaches. So with that in mind, you know, our question here is very open-ended in terms of expression, right? And different types of expression that have potentially been marginalized, you know, in the academic institutional setting. We had this amazing opportunity under the Discovery theme that with the Global Arts and Humanities grant, and they created a space specifically for indigenous arts and humanities. Recognizing that Ohio and Columbus, Ohio State University is entirely comprometidos, like maybe in both of the translation and the non-translation, like we have an obligation, but we also are compromised in some ways, right? That this territory was indigenous territory, you know, and here we are, and how are we going to acknowledge that? So we have a counterpart to Cachahuillaicuna, which is Andean and Amazonian indigenous arts and humanities collaboration. And our counterpart is indigenous Ohio. We are very eager at some point to bring those two groups together because in the few encounters that we've had and exchanges, the parallels and the themes that we handle are surprisingly similar. So in terms of like a hemispheric, you know, type of awareness and approach, and intersection and dialogue with artists as well. One of the major problems that we face, and I'll let my curator sort of express this, is that sometimes we have opportunities to, for example, acquire indigenous art or artifacts, right? And one of the deficiencies has been, well, great, now we have the stuff, but where are the people? You know? So we are thrilled to launch this artist invitation and residency for the whole week. We invite you to all of the events on the agenda and try to make it very productive as an exchange, a two-way exchange. Entonces, ahora sí les voy a presentar a Sebastián. Sebastián vive y trabaja en Santiago de Chile. So he is from Chile. And he is part of a feminist Mapuche collective. ¿Cómo se llama?
Rangin Tuleupu.
Rangin Tuleupu, okay. He's a graduate at the University of Chile and his degree is in visual arts. PhD o MA? PhD. Entonces, he has a PhD in visual arts. He's of Mapuche origin, and a lot of the themes that he works with have to do with the intersection of gender and ethnicity, but many other themes that he works with do not. And so one of the things that we talked about yesterday over pizza and beer was this tendency to box in, people according to their specialization or what we think their specialization should be, But the work of Sebastián is very diverse. So in addition to working with performance, he works with installations, with ceramic, with video art, and he explores, by way of that, cultural similarities and cultural differences, as well as stereotypes produced at the intersection of Western and non-Western sort of encounters. Sebastián is the recipient of many awards. So in 2017, he was awarded el Premio de la Municipalidad de Santiago, and then in 2018 he received el Premio Fundación Fava for his work. Sebastián comes to us at a moment of intense political strife in Chile, and we're very grateful for the fact that you're here, because I know that you feel a pull to be there as well. And I hope that we have opportunities to make that also part of the conversation, as you wish. Our compromiso, so our commitment to our resident artists is one, of course, we're delighted that our students can interact and benefit from this encounter, but it has to be a two-way, and more than a two-way street, right? So part of it is that Sebastián gets to come here and inform some of the projects that we have in a very open way. We are entirely open to the criticism. We're very self-critical, actually, but we are entirely open because I feel that it's only by way of these very open dialogues that we can actually change the way that we do things. And some of those changes are going to be difficult. Thanks to Richard Fletcher, we have been digesting some of these ideas through the decolonial reading group, and realizing some of the institutional changes or the methodological changes or the theoretical shifts really challenge us and involve sometimes processes of unlearning or undoing in order to begin to engage in this two-way dialogue. Entonces, bienvenido, Sebastián. Y lo que podemos hacer es, nos encantaría escuchar algo sobre ti, sobre tu trabajo, ¿no? En inglés o en español, aquí te damos la mano en traducir. Y luego pasamos a un diálogo, quizás, sobre este tema que manejan los curadores de la colección andina amazónica. And I will let Sebastián kind of talk about his work and his participation in this residency. And later on, I'll introduce the student curators who will kind of lead a discussion with just some questions to prompt the audience. We invite audience participation, bring in your life experiences or your perspective. But I do want to point out that the student curators are all undergraduate students. We're little by little bringing in graduate students too. But the work that they've done is absolutely incredible. So I thank you all, and you'll get a chance to interact with them and discuss with them here in just a little bit. Entonces te paso la palabra, Sebastián.
Mari Konfuche, incheta Sebastián Calfuqueo Piñén, artista ka waria chenyen, incheta Santiago waria tuun, ka mulei no imperial ka Caraway Meo. Hi everyone, my name is Sebastián Calfuqueo. I'm an artist from Chile, but I am not say I'm Chile because the political moment is not the best, but I say I am Mapuche first than Chilean. I'm very happy and honored to be here. Michelle say when I get in the airport, I have a very difficult moment because in Chile now have a very difficult political moment. Today, the people have a very high resistance to the government. because we stay for 40 years in dictatorships constitution, and today is a really political moment to change that. I feel so different feeling about this moment because all Latin America have a different explosion, social things, different things in Bolivia, Ecuador, in Chile. I think it's a really potential moment to change all. In Chile, the people have a really difficult moment with the indigenous people because the police in like 1 year ago killed a Mapuche person in the south of Chile. Very violent. The police don't show the evidence to the society. But like 1 month before that killed him, the police show the truth, and the truth is that state is very violent today with the indigenous community in Chile. Today we have a very strong political moment to the people, the poor people or the normal people have a real connection with the indigenous people. Now it's a very, sorry, my English is not really good, but I can try to explain you. Today is a really good moment to make alliance, have a community with not only the indigenous people. It's a really moment to make a connection. All the people have a problem with the colonialism and neoliberalism politicals. So my work is about my experience. I am a Mapuche from the city. It's not the same that the real Mapuche people, but I have a experience different because I told with Michelle yesterday about my grandfather and my grandmother. My grandmother, how can I say that?
That she went to work as a nanny?
Yeah. She's when she had 8 years old. My grandfather is a bread maker.
Bread maker, yes,
Bread
a
maker.
baker.
Yeah.
Bread maker, like 11 years old, and that is the way to the indigenous people do in the city. That is the two professions the people Mapuche do in the city. For me, it's very necessary to say that because I am very privileged to make art today because all my family and all the Mapuche people put our bodies in the resistance to today I make these things now. And I'm really happy to make art and not do other things. My work is about that experience. Today I make an investigation about the gender before the colonization, the other possibilities or other ways to make homosexuality in the before experience in the past, other ways to make women or men in the culture, I researched about how the colonialism and the religion make a difference in the ways to relationship with other bodies or other spirits. Two, I have a research about the how the dictatorship changed the ways to the community have experience with the community. In Chile, dictatorship changed all that organization. Pinochet said the Mapuche don't exist because all are Chileans, and that is really complicated because he said the Mapuche don't exist. And today we have a
resurgence.
Resurgence to new generation to learn the language, to make other ways to connect with the space on the air, and have other things to ways to the relationship with others. And I think this is a really epic moment to change all with the past. So that is my introduction.
Thank you. So I'm thinking of our conversation yesterday, and we're just going to launch the conversation here. But I'm thinking about what Sebastián just said in part of our conversation yesterday. And right now, the idea of like generations, you know, building to this moment. And you said they put their bodies for the resistance, you know. And it really left me thinking about your work with the body, you know, as a canvas, but also as like an instrument of politics, right? And last night I was thinking how interesting our conundrum, right, where we have like this emphasis on bodies and resistance throughout like this entire trajectory of colonial times, subjected to violence and experiences in order to come to this moment of a resurgence, like a different sort of expression. And then here we are with a very disembodied representation, right? We have the stuff, we don't have the people, you know? So maybe that's an interesting point to sort of reflect upon, you know, of what does that mean? With the added complication, right, that we do talk about object ontologies. So we talk about the agency of objects as living, acting beings, you know, and whether at some point they can come to also participate, you know, in the idea of like the presence of bodies and stuff like that. So as people kind of please react to that, you know, Sebastián react to that in español, en portugués, en lo que sea, no? And I see a hand going up, but just before that, I wanted to just introduce our curators, and then curators, when you have the first opportunity to speak, kind of introduce yourselves a little bit, talk about your experience. But we have Elaine Loden here, who has been a curator for the collection for the last year. Frances Dillon, who joined us this semester, although she had she maintained ties internationally. She was studying at the Sorbonne in France, and stayed connected to the collection throughout her stay in France, and now has joined us as one of our curators here. And Brendan D'Souza, who also has been with us for a year and is currently working on a new interactive feature. And when the moment is right, you can talk about that. Jenna Myers might join us in a little bit, but that's our fourth curator of the collection. And then we also have a couple of graduate students who have joined recently. They're not here right now. Maybe, do you want to introduce yourself, or? No. Al lado tuyo, no, here. No, that's okay. So from the decolonial reading group, but with an interest in curatorial sort of stuff. That's okay. So let's roll with it. So Richard.
Sebastián, puedo hablar un poco de español, pero mejor en inglés si posible. Your work is so video performance, but you also have these ceramic pieces, and I thought to talk about those ceramic pieces might be an interesting way to connect with what Michelle was saying about object ontologies or objects having these stories. Could you tell us a bit about the ceramic works that you do?
Yeah, I don't make traditional ceramic of the Mapuche culture because Mapuche culture have a most famous about the jewelry in plata.
In silver.
Yeah, in silver, and it's very famous to the textile way. But the ceramic is not really know it because it's more to the north communities like Atacameños, Quechua, or Aymara people, but we have a ceramic too. But I made a object to have a connection with the prejudice, stereotypes about the people in Chile and Latin America. I make like a I don't know the name, but it's like a toys. It's like a toys, like a toy, like a this size. He's talk about the gender, the race, and class in Chile, in Latin America too. And I make like a stereotype of the people in Chile. Now I work in some project about the water in Chile because the constitution say the water is not a human right. That is terrible. The constitution say the water is private things, and the people can make money to water. In the past, the community have a connection so special with the water because they say that the water is a spirit. The water is have a nyan. The nyan is a word in Mapuzungun. Nyan is like it's like a person with a spirit, and when you stay in some space, you need to have a permission to this spirit to stay in this space. And this is not the way to. This is not a contemporary way to have a relationship with the water. Today I have a installation with ceramic, talk about the relationship with the water in the past, with the connection with the contemporary form to make money. I do now I research about the past ceramic with the contemporary way to make that.
Thank you. Yeah, no.
Well, so I'm looking at Brandon because he worked with one of our figurines, which is right behind there. That is Sungui. It's the spirit of the water. And also she's wrapped, and I'll let Brandon take it from here, but in the Andean Amazonian cultures, the water spirit is also most powerful. So we see themes of deluge, right? Floods, very powerful in terms of transforming, in relation to a concept that's called Pachacutic, which is the overturning of time and space. So every so often in the millenarian perception of Andean Amazonian peoples, there's a reversal of time and space, and basically like everything gets completely destroyed, right? And then reinvented, from that. Territory, interestingly, is also claimed by way of water. So there are underground rivers that connect the Americas to Europe. I mean, they run everywhere. And Amazonian people recognize their territory not by land, but by water. So very potentially there's an interesting decolonial move here where there's a claim to European territories through these underground rivers. But maybe, Brenda, do you want to say a little bit about Sungui, maybe?
So just briefly, she's depicted there on the top shelf, all the way to the far right. Yep.
Yes.
And she is depicted as the androgynous water spirit of the hydrosphere. So you can see she's draped in sungui, which is a black anaconda spirit, which is very prevalent in the Andes. But she's just known for her destruction. She brings torrential rains, earthquakes, mudslides. Just very powerful spirit.
Yeah. And all of the spirits that are depicted there have both male and female representation. The female representation of some of the spirits that we have there are particularly destructive. They're the most powerful. Another concept that we have is about transformation, you know, so getting into issues of material representation, where spirit is represented as a woman, right, but also represented as the anaconda. And there's always this, what we call transmogrification, right, so the shape-shifting or transformation that happens, you know, going from mythic time to contemporary representations back and forth. So it's kind of an interesting concept also in terms of perceptions of gender, you know, where all of these spirits have two different representations at least, you know, and multiple expressions of that. No sé si... Y pueden comentar en español si quieres. Aquí tenemos colegas que nos pueden ayudar también a traducir.
Yeah. In the Mapuche culture, we have some spirits don't have a gender. It's like it's not like a woman, male or female spirit. That is very interesting because have other possibility to think about the gender. I talked with Michelle yesterday about the complementary or what is the other word? Complementary
Duality.
Duality.
Yeah.
And duality, and today in my culture that is very problematic because they have in the eso deja fuera otras posibilidades de pensar esa relación entre los géneros, ¿no?
Mm-hmm. So we have a very strong concept of duality, of gender duality, throughout the Andes and into Chile, of course. But that concept has been kind of simplified maybe and leaves out other forms of expression of gender that are prevalent in the indigenous cultures.
For example, the Nien is the spirit of the nature, don't have a gender. The sun don't have a gender. It's like Antu is a name. It's very similar to Inti, no? We have it's very special because we have a story, very particular story in Mapuche culture because we have a first colonization with the Inca Empire. The name to say foreign game, you say Winca.
For foreigner.
Yeah.
Qué interesante.
Yeah, you say Winca when you say Chilean people or stranger people, you say Winca, and that is because the first colonization is from the Empire, Inca Empire, and the second colonization is from the Spanish Empire. And the third colonization is from the state of Chile, and that is so much problematical situation because the Mapuche with the Spanish people have a trait to have an independent space to the Mapuche people. When en el 1840 cambió eso radicalmente con el Estado chileno.
So in 1840, that changed dramatically in terms of the independence of the Mapuche people with the Chilean state. Yeah. So this is really interesting. It's the first time that I've heard very explicitly this third wave of colonization. You know, so the first wave really differentiates. So we cannot generalize about Latin America, and often, so for example, the area where Santi Walapuro just joined us. Hola, Santi. Santi is from the area of Otavalo, no? And there too, there was an intense, confrontation with the Inca. And yet, in contemporary times, there's an appropriation of some of the words or some of the, things that the Inca did as part of like a more pan-indigenous identity in some ways, right? But there is also a very strong, proud sort of defiance of that, and people reclaiming words like Luis Enrique Cachiwango. He says, do not use the word Inti Raymi, that is like Inca, We use Hatun Punja, the great day, no? And definitely not San Pedro y San Juan, that is like the religious colonization. So I think that the first colonization that you're talking about is so interesting because there is this other thing that is happening in a very short period of time before the Spanish come, right?
I think it's another way to thinking about the colonization because, for example, the ceramic is from the Inca experience with the Mapuche people, and now we have this research about the investigator thinking about this colonization.
And then the third one, which is also very interesting, is that often we hear the terms post-colonial, like as if the birth of the state somehow overcame that period of colonization and transitioned into something else, And it's a very problematic term because I think that the legacy and maybe like a new invention of different forms of colonization and colonialism continue in the state. So this is it gives us a different time frame sometimes than what we usually think about. Juan Ceballos is a professor in the Department of Spanish and Portuguese, and he works in Peru.
Yeah, I just want to remind that each wave of colonization corresponds with one phase of capitalism. And that's very, very clear if we contextualize, historically, economically speaking. And don't forget that the Mapuches, right now, they are suffering.
Yeah, I think the state colonization is with the neoliberalism way, because Mapuche territory have water, the first things the people have interest in, and the other thing is the have air to make a forestal company. Forestal company in Chile is very terrible because he planned only pino and eucalyptus.
So they plant only pine and eucalyptus for economic reasons, right?
Yeah, because eso seca las napas subterráneas y ha dejado sin agua a las comunidades indígenas en los territorios.
So these are two species of trees that are not endogenous to the region, and they take up the water, and then create problems for the communities with escasez de agua.
Yes, and that have a problem with the ancestral forest because they don't have a possibility to grow in this space. Today is a very problematic because the state have a connection with the forestal company. That is the problem today with the communities.
Yeah, and also in relation to water, don't forget that the Chilean government has privatized
the water.
The water. That's a huge problem.
Yeah, it's a huge problem because
in favor of the big corporations.
Today, the water can be sold like a you can sell water if you have water in your territory. The state cuando tú tienes agua en tu territorio en Chile, el Estado te regala los derechos del territorio, del agua. Pero como el agua es un bien privado, tú puedes usar esa agua para venderla a cualquier persona y también comercializarla en el mercado. Entonces el agua tiene un valor altísimo de millones y millones de pesos hoy en día y se han entregado más derechos de agua de las aguas posibles para explotar.
So the moment that you have water in your territory, that territory is recognized, but people can since it's privatized, they can sell the water. The value of that is in the millions of pesos. And right now there's been more and more recognition for that particular ability to sell the water within the Chilean state.
How does a company or individual claim the water to sell it?
¿Cómo es que un individuo o una comunidad reclama el derecho de vender el agua?
Because the state make a contract with all people have a connection to the territory. La gente puede ir a reclamar al Estado un derecho de agua. En general son empresarios quienes tienen el derecho de agua. Y se ha dado mucho que los empresarios son también quienes están en el gobierno. Entonces el negocio del agua es tan fuerte hoy en día que por eso también hay tantos trabas para desprivatizar y volver pública el agua.
So many of the people who approach, with claims to sell the water are entrepreneurs, and they happen to also be in the government, so you can sort of see like the network of control there. So this is why there's so many protests, to make the water a public resource once again.
So in the first instance, the government claims all the water, and then
gives the rights to sell, yeah. But there's another interesting thing, which
the
is...
process is a little different, no? In Chile, what happens first is that, the indigenous community, the Mapuche community, they own for many centuries ancestral land. And what happened? The government, the Chilean government creates laws in order to, I could say, let's talk straight, usurp the ancestral lands. And the euphemism is they privatize, but actually they create a legal system that usurps those lands. Once and who gets those lands? The Chilean corporations or international corporations. You could say American corporation, European corporation. Once they do that, the second step, they privatize the water because they have created a law to do that. And that's why the big corporations are making money twice. They are making money with the land because they buy the land for agriculture, agro-export, any kind of agro-export, and second, they make money with the water. And the communities, the Mapuche communities, are losing everything. That's why there are a lot of discontent, and they want to go back to the past, when they at least they have some rights. They are looking for a revolution. They are only one to go to the past when there were some laws that protected their lands, protected their water, and that's the big conflict right now.
But maybe to kind of segue that back to conversations relevant to like what we're doing here is also not just the idea of rights, and we've talked about the difference between decoloniality and decolonization. Maybe you can kind of fill in the gaps there for us. But very important, rights to land, rights to water, right? But one of the things that I think is really compromised here is the relationship to water and to land, not as just resources to be bought and sold, but as a really deeper connection that is like a spirit, or like a living entity, So I don't know. I mean, I think that this idea of the relationship that is transformed then by this very politicized economic environment seems to speak to some of those issues too,
Yes. We have two process because I say the Mapuche is not only Chilean territory, it's Argentinian territory too. We have two processes in the same time. In Chile, the process is pacificación de la Araucanía. It's like a Pacifically Araucanía. It's a terrible name. It's not specifically anything. And in the Argentina territories, the name is Conquista del Desierto. Because in Argentina the people fue llevada a los territorios donde no crecía nada, donde no había agua. Y posterior a eso se dieron cuenta que había petróleo y salitre en esos territorios, entonces quisieron nuevamente sacar a las personas mapuches de Argentina de esos lugares por los intereses económicos de la empresa minera, en ese sentido.
So there was a re-territorialization, you know, of indigenous people, Mapuche people, to places that were considered to be deserts, you know, or unproductive, only to subsequently find that there were all kinds of rich mineral potential there, petroleum and other minerals. And then this attempt to re-territorialize or relocate, you know, people there because of these financial interests. So, yeah. Curators, do you guys have any questions that you'd like to throw in?
So kind of maybe shying away a little bit from like the resources, but still staying on the topic of money. One kind of interest that I had was just like the monetization, I guess, of indigenous art, and just kind of tourism and how that kind of factors into your creations or like the artists that you work with, if you could speak on that.
Yeah, I think we have two ways to think about the indigenous art. We have a contemporary artist and the traditional artist, and it's not the same pay. La gente no hace una diferencia radical entre esos dos lenguajes. Uno pretende que esté en un lugar muy tradicional de las representaciones indígenas del pasado, versus una que es contemporánea, nueva y fresca, ¿no? Como que es la idea que quieren implementar. Pero yo estoy en desacuerdo entre esas dos categorías porque creo que las dos conviven de la misma manera. La tradición textil, la tradición de la joyería, de la cerámica, han contribuido también a que hayan esas nuevas voces dentro de las reformulaciones también de esos lenguajes. Y ha sido súper interesante, por ejemplo, la pregunta de si existe o no existe un arte mapuche contemporáneo hoy en día en Chile, que es una pregunta constante que sale y se formula, que si entra o no la artesanía dentro de ese lenguaje contemporáneo del arte. Y yo creo que es una pregunta que ni siquiera todavía podemos responder tan claramente, pero que va hacia allá, que no son dos lenguajes tan separados, sino que se están todo el tiempo comunicando y retroalimentando.
I'll try to synthesize. So this is a very challenging sort of conundrum, right? What we call like a habitual or institutionalized division between these two categories of traditional Mapuche art. So how do we talk about Mapuche art? And contemporary Mapuche art, right? As if these were irreconcilable. And another problem with the traditional that Sebastián mentions is that it's often thought of as something from the past, right? He does not see such a huge division between the two and feels like they both sort of feed each other, no? But that the contemporary Mapuche art brings in like a fresh perspective and fresh ideas. So yeah, so not such a dramatic separation, and actually a challenge to even having these categories in the first place to represent Mapuche art. I think that is a very good point because so as we do the tour of the collection, often people ask, you know, whether like this is like they consider it from the past, right? Or if you mention anything indigenous, you know, there's this kind of idea that is something about the past. And I think that is why we are particularly delighted to have you as our you really launched this like in the face of all of these stereotypes, you know, of saying, you know, Sebastián is a contemporary Mapuche artist. Some of his art may speak about ethnicity, and other art does not, you know, and it really challenges our expectation that Mapuche people make Mapuche art, or that they represent Mapuche identity exclusively, you know, and that they're somehow boxed in, you know, to that type of representation. We had talked a little bit about being encasillado también, you know, in a couple of ways. One, your identity as a Mapuche, no, but then all of these other identities that represent you, you know, or that you are. And then also in terms of disciplines. So we talked about how some people that are more invested in the discipline of art viewed a video that Sebastián made that was a very intense, like, personal video, and the only thing that they commented on was the quality of the video. So they completely missed the message, you know.
People say, why you do video? Why you do like textile or other things? I say, well, I like videos. Sorry.
But I think that it brings in like a much broader discussion, right, about that interdisciplinary sort of conversation, and how sometimes in our boxes we completely miss the message, and I think that it happens more often than we think. Yeah.
Kind of to go off of that, I'm also an artist, a digital artist, and I'm in the art education department, and I'm working with you know, the ACAD project, and thinking about, for me, what I'm most curious is how to intersect contemporary digital mediums with traditional arts and traditional ways of knowing and being, and how to do it appropriately and in ways that is meaningful to the artist. And in like what you were saying about how we have this preconception about it being in the past, and how do you connect that to contemporary digital and virtual mediums? How have you done that? You said in video. Are there other ways in your work or in others' work that you're familiar with where you can find that connection?
Yeah, I always say before that I put my body in my art, other people put the body for my generation, make this experience and this type of art. And I think is in Chile, for example, it's very clear the history of art, because in the 19th we have a Mapuche artist, but the art history don't have a space for these artists. And today we have a reformulation about the story of art, because we have artists in the past, and the art don't make it this possibility in the past. Yo soy muy como agradecido de todas esas generaciones pasadas que pusieron el cuerpo y su arte y su disposición para generar discursos que también tensaran esa relación con lo chileno. Y creo que es muy importante también que esos vínculos que se han dado en el pasado sean valorados hoy en día para poder seguir creando esas vinculaciones. Entonces yo no soy crítico con el arte tradicional, porque creo que también es una plataforma que ha permitido que hoy en día yo también tenga una voz distinta. Y en ocasiones sí trabajo con comunidades con oficios más tradicionales y en otras ocasiones no. Entonces no creo que también he salido un poco de ese prejuicio de establecerme solamente en un lugar como artista del video, o artista de performance, o artista cerámico, o cualquier otra categoría.
So once again, Sebastián mentions the generations in the past, you know, the artists in the past that put their work on the line, they put their bodies on the line, you know, and that it is thanks to the work that they did that he today feels that he has a platform and he has a voice of his own, you know, for expressing his own art. So it's interesting as I listen to this that there's not a disjunction between like the young people rebelling against the old ways or something like this, but a real valuing, valorización, no, valoración, of what came before that allowed this generation to do what they do and to express what they express, and also to throw off the prejudices. So I think the stereotypes of what is expected of, a new generation of Mapuche artists. Yeah. Did I get that? Oh. Yeah.
Maybe. Okay. Good morning to everyone here. Well, I was just thinking, I came late, so I don't know the whole content, but one thing, for the thing that I heard, one of the ideas is like kind of maybe not really comparing Chile and Ecuador, but right now that for the situation that's happening right now in Chile, as we know, the government decided that they can kind of reformulate, they kind of change the constitution or something like that. So as Mapuche and maybe other indigenous groups in Chile, can they have some kind of voice? Like asking that because like in Ecuador, as you all might know, the nature has rights, like the nature itself has rights, at least in paper. That's not in practice, but nature has rights in Ecuador. So, as I know, like indigenous communities, we are pro-nature. Like we kind of feel that the nature and us, we are connected together, right? So, in that sense, can the Mapuche people or somebody on the indigenous groups in Chile fight for that? Like, if they are opening the constitution, how you guys can kind of come together and kind of propose those things or other things, like to the government or to those people who are gonna be gathering to change the constitution. Yeah, we now have a process to make a plurinational constitution, and we need to make a different nation. That is, I think, that is the principal proposal.
Purpose.
Purpose to the Mapuche people in Chile. We need to make a determination about the territory, about the ways to relationship with the community. We have a language, we have a tradition, we have different ways to the Chilean people. But today, the movement, the resistance is with the Chilean poor people and normal people. And we need to change the constitution because the constitution is the problem for all in Chile. All the police have a power because the constitution do that. The water is privatized because the constitution says that we need a plurinational state for the future.
No, está bien, está bien. Tenemos una semana para seguir dialogando.
I'm curious about contemporary Mapuche artists who are embracing contemporary media and incorporating tradition as well as current ideas and techniques within the art world in Chile. Are you getting recognition from the art world at large? Are you able to get exhibitions, museums collecting your work, articles in publications? how is that working?
Bueno, nosotros en Chile la valorización hacia el pueblo mapuche comenzó hace unos 10 años. Antes de eso había un racismo imperante muy grande que no permitía como esas posibilidades de poder valorar a los pueblos indígenas en general, sobre todo el mapuche. Pensemos que el territorio mapuche ha sido un territorio en resistencia mucho tiempo, donde la dictadura nunca se acabó y donde el uso de la fuerza policial ha estado permanentemente desde los 70 hacia adelante. La policía puede usar un estado de sitio y matar a quien quiera en esos territorios. Y la pregunta sobre el arte contemporáneo mapuche es súper reciente. Yo creo que empezó hace unos 5 años aproximadamente. Y esa pregunta empezó a estar recientemente, hace 2 años, en las colecciones de museos, en preguntarse qué ha habido hacia atrás de esta generación de artistas entre 30 años, que es la que yo correspondo, para esa pregunta por el arte mapuche. Y bueno, yo y otros artistas hemos estado haciendo investigaciones sobre cómo otros artistas en los 90s, en los 80s estaban produciendo arte mapuche y cómo podemos traer en valor también esas prácticas que en el pasado fueron invisibilizadas también por el arte. Y hoy en día recién se está empezando a ocupar esos espacios como una posibilidad diferente al arte chileno. Y a mí me ha pasado que mi trabajo ha sido muy polémico y también muy bien recibido por esta interseccionalidad de mapuche queer, que es como es súper exótico para el mundo del arte. Entonces, bajo ese exotismo, yo también le he sacado bastante provecho a ocupar esos espacios y tratar de generar también vinculaciones con otros artistas, sobre todo mujeres. Mujeres mapuches que tienen un trabajo político muy importante con el cuerpo, con el tema de desbaratarle esa idea de lo femenino, de la mujer. Siempre se le asocia esta idea de lo femenino como guardadora del saber, como una mujer recatada que mantiene como esta ancestralidad tan ahí en su cuerpo y en su historia, ¿no? Y creo que las mujeres artistas mapuches están cambiando radicalmente esa forma histórica como se ha construido la imagen de la mujer.
Wow, ¿alguien quiere darme una manito con la traducción? ¿Rebeca o alguien? ¿No? Yo voy a empezar y después de pronto alguien me da llenando los huecos, ¿no? But, you correct me.
Yeah.
I'm going to miss a lot of things here. But Sebastián was saying that the initial valuing of Mapuche art maybe started about 10 years ago. And then maybe 5 years ago, another sort of moment of valuing indigenous art. And even 2 years ago, like just to kind of date things as very recent, right? 2 years ago, kind of a discussion about museum collections and things like that. So it's in this space, of these last 30 years, that where this conversation has been very recent, and the valuing of Mapuche art and Mapuche culture, because as you were saying before, there's still this idea that the state can just go in and kill people or, create violence, with no consequence. Within this space, Sebastián has found a space for himself, like a niche that is both polemical and also well received as Mapuche queer. So it brings up a very, he said exotic, like it's an exotic mix and kind of maybe unexpected. And his work very much in connection with women artists and women political movements. Where typically women are seen as like the guardians of culture, that they have that power, but as a maybe understated, would that be the right word? Como que menos visibles, but that they're the guardians of language, of culture, of tradition. And the women that he has been working with are much more dynamic, and sort of like changing a lot of the political and economic and cultural landscape. So that's kind of what I got from what you were saying. And I'm curious, because I think that there is that space, so that space that you occupy with the concept of exotic, right, as both polemical, but also this issue of reception of that, right? And the idea of potentially like appropriating what you're doing, you know, so we had talked about sometimes people using Mapuche ceremonial jewelry on a daily basis, or what gets taken as representative of Mapuche culture, both in the global representation, but also in the state. You know?
The people like the spiritual way, the Mapuche culture, but don't like the political way. And I think it's necessary to make art and put the political weight before the spiritual way, because in the hippie culture use the spiritual things and don't talk about any political things, and Mapuche culture have a very high resistance about the political things. We have autonomy, territory, we have a language, we have traditional culture, we have all things in the. So some people use the image of the woman in the culture to say, oh, it's spiritual, it's so strong, but they don't can
appreciate?
Yeah, they don't appreciate the political, strong political voice for the woman. Today the woman have a really participates in the political things, and that is a change, like a thing in the 10 years, I think, ago.
Otra cuestión. Sebastián, si nos puedes hablar un poco de cuáles son los principios que debe de guiar la manera como nosotros, entendiendo esta colección, deberíamos de como hacer ese acercamiento entre los estudiantes, que muchos no han viajado a Sudamérica, que tienen un conocimiento de la cultura indígena que está iniciando, y que también están trayendo los perjuicios, no de una manera mala, pero de lo que ellos han sido expuestos en el pasado. ¿Cuáles son algunas cosas que quisieras que nosotros tengamos en mente cuando hagamos estas colecciones, cuando interactuamos con los estudiantes y cuando hablemos de culturas indígenas en el ámbito del arte, que nos pueda ayudar? So I'm asking Sebastián if he can share with us sort of how we might approach the collections that we have here in relation to how we work with students, how we're curating these collections, and especially how do we make these this sort of introduction to indigenous art, especially for students who may not have traveled to South America, who are starting their first maybe view of indigenous cultures, and that they come with prejudices, but not in a bad way, but it's just what they've been exposed to, just some of the things that we might think about.
Yeah, I have experience with the indigenous museums in Chile in the South, because I soy parte de una plataforma de cine indígena.
So he is a member of a committee, plataforma, like a platform?
It's like a platform of indigenous cinema.
Cinema. Yeah, sorry.
We have experience in the South with the Mapuche, the only Mapuche museum of art from the community. The community made the museum. This experience is very nice to me, because he have a other way to relationship with the objects. The object is not only see in the vitrinas,
Glass case.
like a glass case. The objects have a spiritual connection with the Machi. He's a shaman in the Mapuche culture. They have a liberation, como limpieza energética de los objetos.
So the Machi does like a cleansing of the artifacts for energy.
Yeah, and sometimes the community goes to the museum and have a relationship directly with the object. The kids, for example, can touch the object with the supervision with the conservation people and all things, but we have, I think it's necessary to break up the archaeology ways to have a connection with the object. For example, I have an experience with the Archaeology Museum of Araucanía. In the past, the name is Museo Araucano. It's a name to the racist people called Mapuche people. Araucano is not the way to want to be called. When I stay in the museum, le pedí al director del museo estar dentro de una vitrina. Y él se negó rotundamente porque me decía que había habían formas que se tenían que respetar dentro de la institución y todo ese tema. Y bueno, yo finalmente me puse igual en una vitrina y eso fue súper interesante para quebrar esa relación aurática de los objetos, ¿no? Los objetos son para utilizarlos, son para tener una conexión directa con ellos. Son objetos que son utilizados para contener, para representar también ceremonias. Entonces hay que estar constantemente reactivando esos objetos para que no se pierda esa energía y ese poder espiritual que tienen también los objetos.
Sebastián, I can't even remember what part you said in English and in Spanish, but with this relationship with museums that are made by the community where people are invited to interact with the artifacts. On that cue, you guys want to pass around some stuff and let people hold things? Yeah. So we always open our vitrinas, so people can reach in there and hold things. So yeah, pass around some things so people can hold them. We also talk about affect, conexión afectividad, ¿no? But so he also had a relationship with a museum, an archaeology museum, which is named with the racist name for Mapuche, Araucano, right? It's not the self-identifier of the Mapuche people. And when he went to this archaeology museum, he asked the director if he could climb into one of the glass cases. I think this is fantastic. To break that idea of, the vitrines. And of course the director said absolutely not. There's some institutional things that we need to respect. But Sebastián managed to climb into one of the glass cases, and one of the display cases anyway. Just to make that point. He says that art and artifacts are meant to be used, not just to be displayed. Yeah, so how does that resonate, maybe for the curators, with some of the things that we talk a lot about issues of access, and it's been one of our big barriers is to give access, to our collection while still keeping it in good shape, maybe? Do you guys want to comment on that, maybe?
Well, I think with our panels that we have an exhibition. We have some QR codes that have embedded, our former curator, Diego, learned photogrammetry. So with some of these objects, so say the panel exposition goes somewhere far away, they can't take the objects with them, but there are 3D models of some of these objects. So we have a retablo, we have one of the gourds, and one of the ceramics that are also more fragile, so it's harder to like encourage the touch with it. But it's another way to interact with them. And I don't know if you want to project.
Yeah, so Francis just mentioned like the ceramics are definitely something that we can't take out very often, just because they're very like one of a kind. So a project that I'm actually working on this semester is set to increase the accessibility that a lot of our viewers could have with our collection. So it's essentially a program that will allow visitors to create their own ceramic vessels. So they'll begin with like a blank vessel, and then they'll be able to choose like the patterns and the colors that they would like to make. And like while they're making these choices, little bits of information are being presented to them. So they're learning about the making process, and they're learning about the art.
But it is one of our biggest challenges, right? Is what do we do, in terms of like just making these things sort of accessible. So we do things like we don't tape them down permanently, so that we can pass them around.
I think too the collection and art in general need to have a relationship with the audience, with the public, because we know the art is very elitist.
Elitist.
I think it's necessary to change that, because the people need a connection with the object in different way. The story of art and the things in the past, we have a relationship with the object. We need to change today. It's necessary to good relationship with all the people.
And maybe from this I can segue to Richard. I was teaching a class and talking about the colonial gaze and how do we shift it. But one of the things, and maybe a question to the audience, right? So how is it different to actually handle some of these pieces versus just looking at them and feeling like you can't touch them? We've had people drop the gourds and freak out, things like that, or like accidentally spill water on the tapis, or things like that. So what is the difference for you as we pass these things around, to actually hold them and manipulate them? And does it we talk about different forms of literacy. So for example, we're not just looking at it, we're touching it, we're smelling it, we're listening to it, like using different senses. So I don't know, te paso la voz, Richard.
So, just to follow up on the vitrine, so the work of James Luna. James Luna, who indigenous Native American artist who did a project of actually lying in a vitrine, and there were follow-ups to this, and another element is when we were in our reading group, this decoloniality reading group, we're looking at some of your videos. We were also looking at the work of New Red Order, and they are two brothers who's and another collaborator. They start in museum spaces and looking at objects, especially of remains of indigenous peoples, in anthropology museums. And this structure, the remain, this disconnect between the living and the dead and the bodies that are still in museums. And their strategy was not to pass around the objects, but to capture them using digital mapping techniques. So very much like the project. And then manipulate them, create a kind of a new relationship to them. And I think that's the big question, is the relationship. The one concern I have is how can this relationship to artworks, indigenous artworks, actually transform our relationship to non-indigenous artworks? Why do the Picassos and the Monets stay on a wall in this way and it can't be passed around to look at? Like, why? I worry about, I'm concerned about the disconnect between, you know, continuing to keep certain art forms with the aura, you mentioned the aura around them, at the same time as engaging with a more relational element in indigenous art making. So how to indigenize.
I think it's necessary to break the name of genius of art. I think that is not necessary for the contemporary art, because we need to have a relationship with the communities, with the museums, with the art gallery and private space and underspace, all space we can have a connection with others. And I think is in the art today, with the feminist art and indigenous artists, esa discusión está cambiando para bien, para entender de que el arte es un bien de encontrarnos y de conversar. La cultura mapuche le decimos nutram, que es en toda la instancia que podemos tener para vincularnos unos con otros, tener esas instancias de conversar, de pensarnos, de reinterpretarnos, y todo eso sirve para el devenir de lo que viene con nuestras formas de ser, ¿no? Nosotros en el mundo mapuche no decimos humanos, decimos gente, que eso es una forma muy radical de pensar nuestras relaciones, porque cualquiera de nosotros puede ser humano, pero para ser gente hay que tener un compromiso con un otro, y eso es muy radical de pensar esas relaciones también dentro del arte, ¿no? Cambiar esa distancia del artista y de pensar cómo se quiebra ese eje masculino.
So the idea of like breaking with the concepts of genius, you know, in art. Also, he mentioned that in Mapuche culture do not say human, you know, they say people. Anyone can be human, but to be people, you have to have a relationship with someone else, whether that be other people or maybe other expressions.
We need a connection with the space, with the nature, with the other things. Don't have a category the humans.
No. We were reading about that in the Mignolo and Walsh. There was a chapter on the problem of the category of human.
So one of the things that we do here is we talk about how this was an involvement in another discovery theme, which was called humane technologies or livable futures, and the contribution that we had was exploding the concept of the human, because everything that is going around in your hands is people, right? And that the way that we interact with these objects transforms the objects and transforms us. So it's exactly what Sebastián is saying. In Quechua, the name Runacuna, people, no, is not like you're just Runacuna, you know, is a process of becoming. Like you have to actually have to make efforts to become Runa, right? So, yeah, so lots of resonance. ¿Te gustó este? This is so cute. So this is just a little rag doll, not made for commercial purposes, just for a little kid, and we happen to acquire it. Pero es un ayauma, you know, so he has two faces looking forward into the past and backward into the future. Pero es como los niños aprenden, so the children learn by affect, you know, not by reading about it or anything like that. But this is one of our favorites too. Juan.
See, I have a question. The Mapuches, they are using literature as a platform, as a media in general, and I study those things. But doing my research, I learn more and more that the poets or short storytellers, they are using more and more mixed media. And that's for me that's a challenge, because they are very ephemeral, and few people are recording all those events. Because while take place the reading of, I could say, short story, something like that, they are singing, they are dancing, at the same time they are performing. And for me, it is that you have to study. If there is for me, the challenge to find documents that raise all that experience and to study, because the Mapuches made a decision not to do mixed media. And my question is, have you collaborated with those poets or with those dancers, musicians in events that they call arte total? No, that's the.
I say all the time, and my work is not only mine. Is with my friends, with my community. I have a very huge relationship with my collective. The name is Ranjin Tuleufu, and he translates like a between rivers. That is the translate. And for example, I have a very huge relationship with my a poeta Mapuche. The name is Daniela Catrileo. He's amazing. She's I think it's the most important woman with Roxana Miranda Rupaila too in poet. But when I say art Mapuche, I don't only say visual art. I say teatro. I say music. For example, we have a new rap Mapuche today, very stronger. We have a very good dancer. They have a connection with the ancestral dance. We have a lot of people in the cinema, in the teatro, in the different way to have a connection. We have all the Mapuche artists, we have a collective, a bigger collective. The name is Artistas Mapuches Autoconvocados. And we have all the time a connection because we are a community. We have a relationship with us because we are a one community. Yo siento que eso está pasando todo el tiempo, esos intercambios. Por ejemplo, Daniela está haciendo performance, hay vinculación entre el teatro y la performance, hay vinculación entre el rap y las artes visuales. Entonces se ha ido moviendo cada vez más ese límite de decir qué categorías arte y qué no. Por ejemplo, yo no escribo tan bien como Daniela, pero sí ocupo la poesía para mucho de mi trabajo. Muchas de mis obras tienen textos que yo escribo, que yo armo para también hacer esa vinculación, que no solamente lo visual, sino que salirnos también de esos espacios que son tan cerrados.
So define the categories that kind of isolate different forms of expression and bringing them into dialogue with each other. So we are actually at our limit of time, and I want to make a couple of announcements before I thank Sebastián for being here. Tomorrow, Eric, is it open for other people to join you for the tour?
I suppose if people wanted to come,
so
we
tomorrow,
just won't go downstairs.
9 to 10:15 in the Rare Books.
Yeah, in the Thompson Special Collections reading room, or right outside. We can meet there, and we're just going to do a little overview of some of the Central and South American indigenous language materials that are in our collections, but then also touch on some of your other interests, or what we hope are some of your other interests, and give you a sense of what we have here.
Yeah. So if, you know, that one we didn't advertise broadly, but if there are people who are interested to join in, that would be wonderful. And then later, tomorrow, ¿cuándo es? Yeah, it's mañana, no? So we have a
artista. Bienvenido también, Andrés Ramirez. Sorry, Andrés has been a little bit under the weather, but we have programmed the performance. The Abya student group has invited this artist, and our group is very excited to attend. That is going to be at, is it at 7 to 9 p.m., the concert in Ramsayer Hall 100. And I think Abya Student Organization has circulated those flyers, but just in case this group has not received them, it is another opportunity. Qué interesante lo que mencionas de rap, ¿no? Y el trabajo que hace Andrés en la intersección de música, de cine, you know, so we're excited that you're here as well. And then, of course, the performance that Sebastián is going to give on Thursday is a limited seating. So we have circulated that link. So if you would like to attend the performance, sign up. And we also circulated the workshop, which we consider like a teaching cluster with Gisela Latorre's course on women's gender and sexuality. And then dance class is going to be there, and we invite other people to also join in, and it's going to be a workshop on performance. Yeah, so we're delighted to have this conversation. Sebastián, thank you for being here with us. And we look forward to continuing, you know, to talk to you and to get to know you and your work over the course of the week. There are spaces for like lunches or just one-on-one conversations. If you would like to do that, just approach Sebastián or email me or email Alana. Alana is our amazing coordinator for all of this. Yeah, entonces muchas gracias, gracias a todos y gracias Sebastián.